Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan, MS Pearce, Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 4th of February 2025. I'm just getting all my stuff together, having got back from Ukraine, still unpacking my bags, not very quick. I've got loads of my new patches up there, which is pretty cool. Excited about that. I have one of my two flags up there. I've got another one to try and fit somewhere. And my mate Pierre, who I was traveling around with, gave me this awesome, cool little train sign. I absolutely love this. This is the Ukrainian railway system. It's just a little light. Obviously, I want to put it behind me on my bookshelf. Sevastopol, Lysychansk, Mariupol. These are all the places that you'd love to see these trains go to. But unfortunately, so many of them have been taken by Russia. Berdyansk, Melitopol, Donetsk, Kerch. Yeah, bastards. So anyway, that's really cool. Love that. Such a cool little thing. Thanks, Pierre. You're a total legend. Anyway, let's get on with our Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day. Before all the usual caveats apply, you can find them in the description to the video below. We have 1,270 personnel lost, which is fairly high, but actually lower than the 1,300 threshold I arbitrarily have chosen. So that's interesting. 18 tanks is almost double the daily average. So that's a high number there. 24 troop-carrying AFVs is higher than daily average. So interesting that in all the equipment categories, we have pretty high numbers here. 66 artillery systems is the highest for an awful long time. And that's about over three times the daily average. So it's a huge loss of artillery pieces. One multiple launch rocket system, 123 vehicles and fuel tanks, phenomenal number in that category, and 2 pieces of special equipment. So the Russians have lost phenomenal amounts of equipment over the last 24 hours, according to the General Staff. Worth noting that. So I don't know if that means that there has been a spike in activity in certain areas of the front line, but it's interesting that it doesn't fully correlate with a spike in personnel losses. In fact, personnel losses have come down, even though it's still a really high number. Okay, Chris, so Wiki has a couple of threads that are worth looking at in terms of losses and whatnot. An ongoing Russian bid to capture the hamlet of Novoherivka. I presume that's the one on that northeastern front line on the way towards the Oskil River, sort of south of Kupyansk, on the way to, well, around Svatova, to be honest. Anyway, I need to do a mapping update today. Must do it. Appears to have caused such an acute shortage of personnel due to heavy casualties that scarce drone and electronic warfare operators are being expended as assault troops. Not the first time we have heard this, of course. Novoherivka has become the subject of a scandal among Russian war bloggers over the last 2 weeks, since the Russian MOD falsely announced it had been captured before it had even been assaulted. Again, not the first time this sort of thing has happened. This was reportedly due to false reports by Russian commanders on the ground. They've since been throwing meat waves against the entrenched Ukrainians holding Novoherivka, and the Russian war bloggers say this has resulted in huge Russian casualties. The Ural Drone Hub Telegram channel reports that drone and electronic warfare specialists are being thrown into the assault of the 20th Army of the 3rd Motorized Rifle Division. They send 4 people to the front, saying that they need to find a position, and then they take them to the zero line, the line of contact, and force them to assault under fire from machine guns. 5 people out of an already incomplete platoon are dead, 200. Another good half of 300 are wounded. It's not just us, they're sending out electronic warfare operators. We already have problems with equipment because of enemy FPVs, and these assholes have apparently decided to F up the war altogether. It feels like everyone is no longer afraid of the Ukrainians, but of their own side. Lightning calculation, out of 3 people, all were killed. Calculation, out of 2 drone operators, 1 killed, 1 was wounded. We know the guys personally and are shocked by this news. Seems they banned this use of personnel, but here you go again. Some people still think in the magazine way. A trained specialist, what the hell with him? We can't teach him anything else. Apparently, without publicity, inspections, and demolition of the most cunning ones, nothing will change. If anyone can shed some light, I'd be grateful. This is not the first time this has happened. End of quote. This is not the first time this has happened. Specialized troops were reportedly sent into assaults in August and September 2024, reflecting how stretched Russian forces have become. Even medical personnel have been drafted as assault troops after an outcry by Russian war bloggers. This practice was supposedly prohibited, but it appears that localized troop shortages have resulted in it effectively being reinstated. Fascinating stuff there. Anecdotal for sure, but really um, indicating, if true, that the Russians are scraping the barrel when it comes to troops. And there are some claims that it's slowed down quite a bit in the Prokrosk area, that the Russians are not taking the amount of land they previously were, and that's because they are stretched there as well. Indeed, here we have Prokrosk. Russian soldiers fighting near Prokrosk complain that they have to rely on OSINT bloggers to get battlefield information due to a lack of reconnaissance from their own side. It likely reflects Ukrainian successes in suppressing Russian intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drones. The Philologist in Ambush Telegram channel reports on the reports the comments of a fellow war blogger who's communicating with the members of the 114th Motorized Rifle Brigade fighting in Shevchenko, just south of Prokrosk in the Donetsk region. About Shevchenko in the Prokrosk direction is a quote: "The guys from the inaudible couldn't hear that regiment asked me before they came out to see what was really going on there, because they were also sent that way and told go there. There's no one there." The philologist comments, "The amazing nuance here is that in order to clarify the actual situation on the ground, the assault forces were forced to turn to a non military person from a conventional couch who just responsibly tries to monitor the course of events at the front and give adequate reports on them. The circumstance in itself is fantastic, but it only adds to the overall picture of the whole effing theatre of the absurd. In this case, we have sadly familiar situation. People are not introduced to the real situation. They themselves either do not have the opportunity to conduct additional reconnaissance or they're not given time for it. Urgent effing hell." And they are foisted off with a crappy task with inputs according to the classic genre of scamming, stupidity counting on being a fool. So I'm not quite sure about the translation there. The lack of effective reconnaissance is apparent in fiascos such as the episode below, in which a Russian assault squad is wiped out as soon as it disembarks from its APC. So this is a video that I just looked at this morning, actually. Oh, no, last night, where an entire crew or an entire assault squad is or platoon is taken out. Um, that's probably the wrong unit number, but anyway, they disembark from this APC. The APC does a runner, and they will just get hammered by the drone that you can see, is looking down on them now. It has a bunch of munitions on board, probably a Baba Yaga of sorts, and takes them all out, and that's the end of them. So yeah, the philologist quotes the account of a survivor of a very similar incident which occurred in the Casualties area. The man had been sent into battle despite already having serious injuries. He was wounded again very quickly. Quote, "We were given a mission when my partner and I were seriously wounded. They lied through their teeth about an electronic warfare strike, smoke, artillery support at the drone takeoff sites. In the end, we were just sent on a BMP without anything promised, straight under a Ukrainian machine gun and drones. Out of 8 people, 2 were riding on the armor under a barbecue anti-drone cage. 4 were 300 wounded and 4 were killed. The whole beating after dismounting took a minute." The philologist concludes here, so that people at the starting point don't get peed off and refuse, they are effed over in a more sophisticated way. And characteristically, there's some understanding of what supports for a complex attack should look like in the commanders' heads, but the implementation in practice is also reduced to sending people to dash like a fool. The third year of the campaign is winding down, but the bottom, which was punctured in the first year, continues to drag people into the depths of such an organization of combat control and to devour them in these depths at the assaults of each successive village, like at Novoherivka. So there you go. Incredible there. And that refers to the other thread on Novoherivka. Just one, yeah, it's worth having a look at a couple of these other ones as well. Um, yeah, let's bring these in too. So, Russian forces failed to dislodge Ukrainian troops from Kursk Oblast as Kyiv eliminated 30% of North Korean soldiers, says Serhiy Zgurets, Defense Express chief. Following the failure of the fourth offensive wave, Moscow forces are now regrouping, he added. So, Ukraine has done an incredible job to stop the Russians from taking back that land. It would have come at a heavy cost for the Ukrainians, but the Russians and North Koreans have lost an incredible amount. Of course, they can afford to lose those North Koreans because they're not Russians. It will cost Russia in terms of whatever they're giving to North Korea for all those troops. But really, they don't care about their own human lives, let alone those of the North Koreans. Um, and Russian soldiers face execution threats to retake lost ground near Kupyansk. And I wonder if this is Novoherivka. Russian commanders in the Kupyansk sector are ordering their soldiers to retake positions from which they retreated under Ukrainian fire, uh, threatening them with execution if they refuse. Ukraine's Kortizia group of forces claimed today, citing intelligence reports. So there are some real challenges for the Russians in a lot of these places along the front line. They are still grinding out some successes, of course, at least as far as territory is concerned, but it comes at a huge cost to them. Anton Gerashenko, then, to talk about sort of losses and uh, dead Russians, uh, Anton Gerashenko shares this video. Quote from the video: "It's an effing mass grave. They bury men here, and they say they're effing missing." That's the kind of crap going on here. A few euphemisms in there. The video reportedly shows one of the numerous mass graves on the territory of so-called LDPR. Diggers' work and corpses of Russian soldiers are brought in by trucks. The true face of Russian territorial gains and Putin's imperialistic ambitions.
Фуры стоят, вот это все,
So let's listen to exactly what he says. So as you can see here, fields that are being sort of ploughed and dug, not really ploughed, dug with huge trenches to put bodies in. Here, guys, this is a digger working, he says. It's an effing mass grave. That's the effing truck that brought them here. I'll show you there. See, there's the trucks. And he scans off into the horizon, into the background to see more trucks just waiting to come in. They brought effing corpses here. They're mass graves. They bury men here, and then they say they're effing missing. Um, you can see them dragging them in. That's the kind of crap going on here. Just incredible, if true, and no reason to think that's not true. But there's a huge number of Russian dead. Now, talking about Ukrainian dead here, there's news that a pilot captain, Ivan Bolotov, of Ukraine's Air Force 831st Tactical Aviation Brigade, has passed away. So I presume that means a plane has been lost as well. He was just 24 years old. So that has happened. Not sure of any other details other than that pilot being lost. Russian forces are using motorcycles in assaults. So now we're going on to equipment attempting to break through Ukrainian defensives, says Ruslan Pidubny, commander of Antares drone battalion. He explained that this tactic aims to force Ukrainian drone operators into direct combat. So what I gather from this is that the Russians are using motorbike assault groups to storm through the lines and attack drone operators that I presume will be further back from the contact line. And that's something that these drone operators are having to deal with, and then having to, take out these motorcyclists with their own drones. And it's a bit of drone on motorcycle battle going on. There was a quite famous drone operator that was killed in the last 2 days, a Ukrainian one. And I wonder if there's anything to do with this kind of activity. I forget his name, but yeah, they were, there was some stuff on the socials about that. Now, fascinating here, has been a few talking about this. Ukraine's laser technologies have already hit certain objects, according to a commander. Now, we know that the UK has developed the Dragonfire laser that can shoot down things the size of a one pound coin type. It's that accurate within 1,000 kilometers. Sorry, 1,000. That would be amazing. 1,000 meters, so 1 kilometer. It's a very short range thing, but it only costs something like 10p to operate. So it's incredibly cheap to use, and it could be that they have have access to this technology from the British, or it could be from elsewhere. We know that the South Koreans have been developing this. In fact, I have something in my military aid video coming up of the American Navy using laser as well. So the Ukrainians are apparently using it. Laser technologies are already hitting certain objects at a certain altitude, said this commander, who first said in mid-December that Ukraine is using a few nations' is among the few nations with laser weapon capabilities. According to Sukharevsky, Ukraine's laser system called Trizub can down aircraft at altitudes exceeding 2 kilometers. Okay, so this looks like it's actually their own capability that they have developed, and it has a 2 kilometer range. That's amazing. So the unmanned systems forces established less than a year ago already include combat and research units operating across air, land, and sea. When asked how successful the development of these technologies has been, the commander said that Ukrainians' military R&D involves a number of areas. The new system was a result of efforts to find an effective countermeasure against Russian aircraft and drones, especially Shahed-type attack drones, he said. The Kiev Independent could not immediately verify these claims. So that's pretty cool. And then a bit of Russia on fire. There's another burning hangar, this time in Yekaterinburg, going up in flames. Officials say it contained polyethylene and grew to 2,000 square meters. So, yet another substantial fire ripping through something that might or might not have something to do with the war. Who knows? Okay, moving on to distant strikes. Not a great deal of news coming out. I don't really know of any Ukrainian strikes from last night. For the first time in a long time, Ukraine's air defense claimed 100% success during the night attack. 37 out of the 65 drones that were sent were shot down, and the other 28 were stopped or fell harmlessly as decoys. There was damage with falling debris in Sumy, Cherkasy, and Kiev. So that has happened. In fact, here we have Cherkasy. 3 businesses were set alight as a result of falling drone wreckage. The local council reported a massive drone attack on them, with 12 drones being shot down. And then we have a Shahed being taken out by a helicopter here. Now, I'm wondering, I think this is electronic warfare, because he just suddenly goes. And this is one of the Me 17s that was transferred from the US that were from Afghanistan. But interesting that it flies above this drone, of course, flies above this drone, and then doesn't seem there's no door open. It's not shooting anything, and then that drone just suddenly drops, so it loses. I don't know, loses the ability to function, and just falls out of the air and then explodes on harmlessly on the field below. So that is good to see that happening, and I wonder if that's one of the most cost-effective ways of taking out a drone. Yeah, it just says intercepted there. That's by Me 8. So that's a different one going back to December. Okay, what else? Well, Astrakhan gas processing plant that was struck the other night. There was some fire off to one side of it. That was the imagery that I showed you, one of the videos I showed you. That has apparently stopped working after that drone strike. It's one of the largest gas chemical complexes in the world and the largest enterprise in the Astrakhan region of Russia. The plant produces gas, diesel fuel, technical sulfur, etc. Earlier, it's reported that gas condensate processing element was damaged by the drone attack. So that's good news for the Ukrainians there. And another bit of news, I didn't know quite where to put this. I don't know too much about this and what caused this, but Russia faces the ultimate tragedy. The Yerofeyev alcohol distillery in Kubyshev, Novosibirsk, has been blown up, finally hitting the Russians where it hurts. Well, actually, alcohol distilleries like this are actually used for manufacturing products used in explosives and whatnot. So it's not just like kind of hitting a vodka distillery. It's highly likely that this would have a connection to the war, and if that distillery is on fire or it's blown up, then it might well be connected to the war efforts of the Ukrainians. Okay, but I have no other details about that. Right, moving on to some other bits and pieces. South Korean intelligence has confirmed that the North Korean troops are no longer involved in fighting in the Kursk region. Since mid-January, there have been no signs that North Korean troops deployed in the Russian Kursk region are participating in hostilities. Fascinating. Are they regrouping to come back again? Have they had enough? What's going on there? We have the news that, and this is big news, that Ukraine is transferring 50,000 military personnel from various branches to the ground forces to strengthen combat units and launch the first large-scale troop rotation since the full-scale war began, according to UP, Ukrainska Pravda. This accounts for about 20% of frontline forces. Training centers lack resources for full replenishment, so reallocation and recruitment will support rotations. The move isn't linked to negotiations or freezing of the front. The army remains prepared for sustained large-scale warfare, the claims. But this is huge. There are many who haven't been rotated for 3 years. So this will be absolute music to many people's ears. I wonder whether they. I mean, I remember as if it was a long time ago, just the other week, going through the border from Poland into Ukraine and looking at the border guards and the customs officers, often men of fighting age, few women, but mainly men, and just thinking, all of you guys should be at the front line, and that job can be done by older retired people and women. You know, it, it's not rocket science. So there will be a lot of people in these various quasi-militaristic jobs around Ukraine that really could be pulled together and thrown at the front line to rotate some of those people that haven't had a break for 3 years. And I wonder if they're doing something like that. This, I mean, Ukraine is transferring 50,000 military personnel from various branches. I wonder whether there's a lot of HR people, all sorts of mechanics. I don't know what's going on, but this is long overdue. I don't know whether there's any controversy with regard to who they are picking to replace these others, but we'll see. I'm sure there'll be more details about this emerging. Then we hear I think this is some UN. Yeah, the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine has recorded 79 executions of Ukrainian POWs since the end of August 2024. I think the US is just about to pull out. Trump is pulling the US out of the UN Human Rights um, Organization. The mission analyzed photos and video materials from Ukrainian and Russian sources showing executions. These materials were assessed as credible. Says Dmitry Lubinets, the ombudsman. I hope this data will serve as important evidence of the crimes committed by the Russian Federation and contribute to holding the aggressor country accountable. So the slaughter, the war crimes, of genocide continues, says Tim White. Here's a translated statement from Ukraine's Commissioner for Missing Persons after photos of Russia's beheading a Ukrainian soldier. I actually shared on Twitter the other day. It's something I haven't done before, but I just wanted to remind people on Twitter that the Russians are doing disgusting things still. So holding the beheaded head of a Ukrainian soldier, I found it completely unacceptable. Official comment from the Commissioner for Persons Missing in Special Circumstances. Quote, photographic materials from hostile information resources are being distributed on the network, which show an image of a severed head of a Ukrainian serviceman. We'd like to inform you that thanks to the measures taken by the employees of the office, it was previously possible to establish the identity of the deceased. The National Police of Ukraine has already been informed to establish contact with the relatives of the serviceman and conduct the necessary investigative actions to clarify the circumstances of the incident, establish the location of the body, and other important details. The Prosecutor General's office has also been informed about another gross violation of international humanitarian law by the aggressor country. We urge you to refrain from spreading unverified information and to trust only official sources of information. That's fair enough. In order to ensure the inevitability of the responsibility of the aggressor country, each war crime is carefully documented and the relevant information is transmitted to the international legal institutions. I really do hope the Russians are held to account after this war is over. Now, this is something that I will be talking about on the military aid video, but it's worth just talking about this for a second here. Reuters, US briefly paused weapon shipments to Ukraine as the Trump administration debated its policy. This tells you an awful lot about the Trump administration's policy, that they actually stopped already agreed upon and apportioned aid to Ukraine. They stopped it as soon as they came in because they were, we're going to solve this in a day. And of course, no, you're not. You're lying. So that was never going to happen. But what they did was pause aid to Ukraine. Now, luckily, it's not been too serious because it's only been 2 weeks now. But it tells you what the deep intentions are of the Trump administration. They didn't come in and say, we want to continue aid to Ukraine, so let's see how we can continue to help Ukraine. It's like, stop that straight away, because we're not sure what we're doing, but what we don't want to do is continue helping Ukraine anyway. So stop that aid. And then they had to wait to be convinced to allow that aid to then go. That tells you loads. And this is why I'm not supremely confident that the Trump administration is going to do anything to help Ukraine. And if it does, it will be because they've convinced it's transactionally to the benefit of, say, Trump. Or so we're going to talk a lot about rare earth metals later, and about this idea that purely transactionally, Trump may end up helping Ukraine if he can extract as much payment out of Ukraine as possible. And there are pros and cons to that. But anyway, I just think this is really, really interesting. So shipments resumed over the weekend after the White House reconsidered halting all aid, but internal divisions remain over continued support. The Trump administration is divided about helping Ukraine. They are not on Ukraine's side, prima facie, naturally, intuitively. They had to be convinced, coaxed into helping Ukraine. That's the problem Ukraine have going forward. Now, Ukraine has reportedly proposed continuing Russian gas transit in exchange for the return of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and stopping attacks on energy infrastructure, but Russia refused. So there's an interesting little deal here. We'll keep allowing gas to go through to, which is $6 billion a year's worth of trade, through to Slovakia and Hungary, if we can have the nuclear power plant back. And you stop attacks on the energy infrastructure. And the Russians said no. This is stated by Vladimir Omelchenko, Director of Energy Programs at the Razumkov Center Ukrainian Policy think tank. So fascinating ideas. There are lots of deals, wheeling, dealing going on behind the scenes, of course, as you would imagine, at all times here. Right, that's enough from me. Hopefully that was of use and interesting. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really do appreciate that. Almost at 50,000, I believe, subscribers, for whatever that's worth. And it'll be great if you can help me get there. Take care, guys. Really appreciate your support, and I'll speak to you soon.